This is an important meeting for Argentina. This is an important meeting for you and for President Macri. World leaders are already arriving. You're here to meet with the president. What's on top of the agenda?
Well, many things. As you know, the G20 has an ongoing agenda on taxation, on financial stability, and the topics that Argentina is also introducing this year as the future of work, financing of infrastructure. This year we also were treating the issue of crypto actives, or cryptocurrencies. So there are many issues on the table, but the most important thing is that the G20 is a group, is maybe the most important governance group around the world, and reaching a consensus of all these very important 20 leaders and countries is fundamental.
Let's talk about the consensus. There are huge differences that divide the member states in the G20. And they range from trade to migration to trade, migration, climate change, the environment, whatever you like. Where is the best opportunity for consensus?
Well, I will say that there's much more consensus than differences. Of course, it is true that this consensus is not the same than the one that we had until maybe 2 years ago. But still, there's a positive view on all the members of the group on the positive impacts of trade, for example, even when some difference appeared.
Well, let's talk about trade for a moment. Presidents Xi and Trump are meeting over dinner on Saturday night here in Buenos Aires. What do you think is a realistic expectation for the results of that meeting?
Well, that's a bilateral meeting, so it
but
depends.
What they decide has enormous consequences.
Of course.
Not just for the global economy, but for this country too.
Of course. Argentina has a very positive view on trade. We are a country that is entering into a reintegration to the world after many years of isolation. So if trade tensions ease, of course, that's good for Argentina and good for the world. So we expect that a very good dialogue can be reached by both leaders.
Tell me from your perspective, what happens if trade tensions don't ease? If China and the United States can't reach a deal? Because I see it this way. The stakes are high, and I don't need to tell you that. More tariffs means more U.S. inflation. More U.S. inflation means faster rate hikes by the Fed. Faster rate hikes by the Fed mean a stronger dollar, weaker emerging markets, and potentially another attack on the peso.
Well, that's why Argentina is focused on reducing its macroeconomic imbalances. We decided to accelerate our conversions towards fiscal equilibrium to next year. So we are delivering a fiscal correction of close to 3 percentage points of the GDP next year. We have a floating exchange rate regime. So the peso floated this year. That generated a strong gain in competitiveness of our exports, which are rebounding sharply. So, and our current account deficit is going down. So we think that our imbalances right now are heading towards a sharp diminution. So we are in a much stronger position than the one that we're in the past. Of course, we would like trade tensions to ease. That does not depend on us. Our job as hosts of the G20, of course, is not to strike the deal between the leaders, but to act as an honest broker of the different positions.
You talked about the level of the peso. Is the exchange rate at the optimal level for Argentine competitiveness for the economy right now?
Well, on the one hand, a more depreciated peso boosts our exports. On the other hand, it puts pressure on the inflation rate. So it's a delicate equilibrium that should be managed by the central bank, not by the Treasury.
So if you aren't willing to comment on the level of the peso, let me ask you this question. The IMF agreement was supposed to insulate Argentina from the volatility of financial markets. But once again, the peso over the past month is the world's worst performing currency. The country risk spreads over treasuries are 650 to 700 basis points. Why don't financial markets yet believe in Argentina? That spread is close to where it was at the peak of the crisis.
Well, the peso, when we launched the program close to 2 months ago, was trading at 41 per dollar. Right now it's trading at 38 and a half. So if you consider the period since we launched the program, the peso is one of the best performers of all the emerging market currencies. So some volatility can appear, and that happened in the last week. But if you consider the program as a whole, the peso was maybe the best emerging market performer in the last 2 months. In terms of the sovereign spreads, Argentina right now is still a big country in terms of its credit rating. And, high yield and lower rated countries were under pressure during the last 2 months. So Argentina correlates with that space of credit. So we think that we will improve once the investor community and the world realizes that our imbalances are being corrected. But that takes time.
That investor community you speak of is laser focused on inflation. Inflation has been moderating.
Yes.
Where's it going to be in December? Is 3% a reasonable number?
Well, right now we are not having an inflation targeting regime.
No, I understand that.
We do not make forecasts.
But help to set some expectations.
Well,
what will things look like in December? What will things look like in 2019?
Well, it will look like much better than what they looked in 2018. Because
sure hope so.
Yes, we are sure of that because
as low as 15%?
The most important source of volatility is generated by the fiscal deficit and by the exposure that generates to the swings in foreign financing. So once Argentina moved to secure financing with the IMF, in which we barely need the foreign financing next year, and in which we are converging to fiscal equilibrium, we will be very isolated from the swings that we had in the past.